So once someone on Instagram told me that they would like to learn more about films and how to analyze them. So they were asking me what kind of books they should read, etc. So I told them that they should go ahead and besides studying film books, they should also read a little bit of political science, sociology, anthropology, etc. And they told me that they don't really have the time to study that much. So you're telling me that you want to learn, but you don't want to study. Actually, that's very relatable. That's exactly how I am. I really could never read a lot of books. However, I found a way to learn outside of books, and that was obviously through films and shows. That's just the kind of show that The Walking Dead is. Besides being a thrilling zombie show, it's also a great lesson in political science. So let's see how the rules of the government and the civilization as a whole are broken down and talked about throughout The Walking Dead. So before we talk about the show itself, let me tell you about the rule of law. So rule of law is one of the first things you study when you're studying political science. Basically, under the rule of law, every human being is equal in the eyes of the law. So there was a time when the monarch used to be above the law. They were considered the god's representative. So they were above the law. However, in most modern democracies, the same laws apply to all human beings, theoretically speaking. Now, rule of law is what the world comes under. Basically, under the rule of law, if you want to murder someone, you will think twice before doing that. When you are going to do something unethical, you will think twice, wonder what the legal implications would be. You are worried to do a lot of things in public because the police might not like it. Whether or not it's arbitrary is a different matter. But that's all because of the rule of law or the perceived rule of law. What happens if the rule of law no longer exists? That's what happens in The Walking Dead. The moment the world ends, law ends, civilization ends, and anarchy begins. And under these circumstances, we understand what the whole point of this whole political system is. I think I'm getting ahead of myself, but those of you who don't know, The Walking Dead is basically a zombie thriller horror show set in the state of Georgia in the US. And it starts from the capital city of Atlanta and goes on to the whole of Georgia and maybe more of the south, I'm not sure. There are not going to be any major spoilers in this video. I will be talking about the larger changes that happen and how the group of protagonists goes from different situations to other situations, but that's pretty much all. So if you've been wondering whether or not you should watch this show at all, here's why you should. So we start off with Rick Grimes, who was a sheriff in Atlanta while the world was still alive. And as he wakes up from a coma one day, he realizes that the world has ended and there was a zombie apocalypse and everyone is trying to eat him. Somehow he escapes and he ends up in a camp outside of Atlanta. Even escaping the city itself is quite an experience for him. Now, this whole thing about escaping the city is very crucial to the show because what you're doing basically is leaving that pinnacle of civilization behind. The city, which was built after thousands and thousands of years of progress, education, development in technology, the Industrial Revolution, social norms that had been set up for so many years, these things have all disintegrated. And that becomes very clear as Rick has to leave the city and escape into a bigger world. Now, the first group of protagonists is first seen settling in a camp outside of the city. This camp is supposedly in a safer place. It's somewhere near a water body and it's in a green pasture, and people from the camp have to go into the city now and then to get supplies. And this is very interesting because throughout the show, one thing we realize is what is truly important to human existence. Right now, if we look around, we are in that kind of a situation where we are realizing how important something like medical care is and how much of our lives we have been taking for granted. So it's a similar situation in the show, but much worse because the protagonists have to scavenge, and when they are scavenging, we realize what the few important things for existence are: food, shelter, and medicine. Most of the time, what happens is the shelter is always under attack. In the beginning, our protagonists think that they are safe outside the city as long as they stay away from the zombies, which they call walkers. However, they soon realize that walkers can follow sounds, they can follow light, and hence they can't build fires, they can't make any noise, and every time they do, the walkers follow. Slowly, the group loses people, it gains people on the way, and they have to keep moving. Throughout the different seasons, our group moves through different parts of Georgia. Now we realize why Georgia as a state has been picked for this particular show, because Georgia is a very varied landscape. So there are mountains, there are water bodies, rivers, there are plantations, there are agricultural lands, grasslands, etc. The largest variety of soils in the US is present in Georgia. So what we find is that in this state, not only do we have the capacity to grow all kinds of things, there's also the availability of different resources like metals, etc. This is also a great place to find different kinds of people. You see, most of the southern states in the US were on the Confederate side during the US Civil War, which means that civil rights for people of color has always been an issue down south. Georgia happens to be the place where Martin Luther King Jr. used to operate from, and so it was also the center of the civil rights movement. Now, this kind of a situation means that even the group of people we are looking at is very varied. So there are people who are racists, there are Asian settlers, there are black people trying to fight this racism, gain equality. Now that the rule of law has ended and so has the civilization, where do we go with the discrimination that different groups of people have faced? And what about the differences between people based on silly things like color and gender, etc.? That's exactly what we notice in this show as we go forward. Initially, racism is a big deal and people haven't let go of those prejudices. But as people have to keep surviving, it becomes about survival of the fittest. This show explains very well what fittest means when we talk about the survival of the fittest. It becomes very clear that human beings are not the fittest because they are the strongest. Not even just because they are the most intelligent, but because we have a sense of community and compassion for each other. Any human being in the show who shows strength of character and compassion does survive, and for a long time. Any human being who's just trying to survive on their own, lie, cheat, rape, murder people for no reason except for their own personal survival, they are the people who don't really survive for long. Now, this is not always true, of course, but we find that our group of protagonists survives till the end with a lot of casualties, of course, because they treat each other as family and stay together no matter what. Now, problems arise when other groups start to target our group of protagonists. Before we get to that part, we need to understand that our protagonists go from outside the cityscape towards agricultural land and then on to a prison, which ironically is the safest place in this world because of how fortified it is. Up to the point when they're in the prison, the biggest problems or the biggest forces of nature that were really attacking them were the walkers or the dead. However, at this point, we find different kinds of governance coming into the picture. The first kind of government we find is under a man who calls himself the governor. The governor has basically fortified a small suburban area very nicely so that people inside of that area don't actually know what the hell is happening outside. And here he makes it seem like everything is fine, everything is perfect, everything is beautiful, people don't lack for anything, there is solar power, there is food, shelter, whatever you may want. Which is very shady, clearly, especially coming from someone who calls himself the governor. And there is shady stuff happening under the governor who actually wants to destabilize all other groups of people who may be happy on their own. Because any other form of living outside of the kind of living conditions he has established are a threat to his ideal. Now, the governor is actually a dictator, which is very nicely identified by the character Herschel in the show. Men like the governor have lived through history, but they have never really lasted long because the dictator's ideals are never practical. The governor tries to destabilize our group of protagonists and destroy their living conditions, destroy the prison that they live in, and ultimately they have to move, but his own government is destabilized and destroyed as well. Because guess what? This fairy tale world that he had created was not realistic. The point at which the politics and economics of the situation becomes truly amazing when finally our group of protagonists finds their own safe haven in the form of Alexandria, and slowly they meet other communities which call themselves communities, but what these really are like gated city states of their own, and they decide that it's time to start trading. And now we have the establishment of the barter system. Until this point, civilization had completely been destroyed. Money did not matter anymore. Riches, wealth, nothing mattered. The bare essentials mattered, and some things that you pick up on the way, like music and books, which are nostalgic remnants of a time gone by, or which are knowledge. These are the things that matter. And hence, at this point, there's a barter system that is established between Alexandria, a place called the Kingdom, and Hilltop. These three places together form a trade route. Now, if you look at these little fortified communities, this is exactly how city-states operated thousands of years ago. In fact, even a few hundred years ago, when there were still kingdoms, especially if you look at palaces and forts in Rajasthan, you'll see that the city was always surrounded by a boundary wall. This was not just to protect the city from invaders, but also natural calamities, maybe wild animals, depending on where the fortress is. And this is exactly the kind of function that fortresses play in this show as well. These fortified communities keep their members safe from the attacks of walkers. At the same time, they serve as the boundary between them and the rest of the world which is still alive, because you cannot trust anyone in this world anymore. You see, the rule of law has disintegrated, and that's why people out there are raping, killing, stealing, eating human beings, eating other people. Cannibalism is also shown in the show. Since people outside can't be trusted, anyone coming in is treated as a stranger. This is almost like those little tales we used to read as children, that one day a strange man came into the city and he was taken to the king. It's that kind of a situation. They form like a council of members who have created the community, who are the strongest people, the decision makers, the leaders of the community. They form what we would probably call a gram panchayat, right? This is how each of these communities is ruled. Inside of these communities, agriculture is started again. Some of them do produce power with the help of solar panels. These people start doing woodworking, construction, creating tools for a better lifestyle. Since there's very little energy and oil left in the world, people start using horses again and horse-drawn carriages. So it becomes a medieval world with small remnants of the world which was destroyed. And in this medieval world, the main difference between this and the actual medieval times that we have left behind is that in this medieval world, every human being has to learn to fight and kill, because they have to fight off the walkers if they don't want to get eaten. For this reason, every human being is empowered. So man and woman become equal. Children are taught to fight at a young age. They lose their childhood very quickly, but they are all an equal part of the community. Education becomes practical, hands-on, and books become the chief source of entertainment. Now, it's wonderful to see that it's really the most strong characters that live to see the light of day till the end. Because if you take a character like Carol, she starts off as an abla nari, a damsel in distress. She's abused by her husband. She is always traumatized, always scared. But she sees a lot of dark stuff. A lot of bad things happen to her. But as a result, she comes out strong and as bad bitch Carol. That's what I like to call her. She begins as someone who is always under someone else's protection. But by the end of, I think, the 4th or 5th season, she is taking down an entire group of cannibals to save her friends on her own. Oh god, it's amazing. It's I love Carol. She's my favorite. Now, speaking of cannibals, let's see the different kinds of people out in the wild. There are people who believe that they have to act like the dead to become the dead, because this is the world now. There is no more law, there's no more civilization. We want to walk with the dead. Their lifestyle is not realistic. Their lives come to an end. There are cannibals who trick people into walking into a safe haven. Their lives, again, when you destroy your fellow human being, you cannot survive for a long time. We have groups of thieves, dacoits, people who kill others and then say we are the fittest because we are like the wild. We are wild people. We just kill and eat and run. They are not the fittest. The fittest are the compassionate, the people who take care of each other, who plan and remember their humanity. You see, this show, the best thing about it is the humanity of it all. Now, this humanity is truly challenged when Negan comes in. Negan, wonderfully, is a character who represents corporations. Corporations are those entities which they have also left behind with the end of the world. However, somehow oddly, Negan has created a factory, and he works as a company which tells people that either they are under his protection or they are dead. And people believe that. You see, why I call him a corporation is because this is exactly how corporations operate today. They make us believe that we need what they are selling us, and we kind of become their slaves. And without them, we feel like our survival is futile. But we don't give ourselves a chance to be free of this thinking. That's why when someone frees themselves of Negan, they don't feel scared that they'll go out and die in the wild. Maybe they will. But at least they are free. Free from want, free from fear, free from their own inhibitions. Negan rules with an iron fist. He scares people. When he talks, he seems like a charming man who's smiling and telling people what they want to hear. But when he's violent, he's the most ruthless, most scarring person in the entire show. And wonderfully, this show takes Negan and decides that it's not a villain to kill. It's a villain that has to be changed. And that's also an interesting journey to be taken along with Negan. What's wonderful ultimately is, like I was saying, the humanity of the show. It's the human element which keeps people alive, which keeps people together till the end. When people care for each other, they decide to make certain sacrifices, whether it's sacrificing something they love or themselves. People live together and die for each other. On the way, they experience a lot of darkness. They become dark themselves. What they do to people outside of their family is also scary, ruthless, not very humane. But that humanity is maintained in that group of protagonists. And that is what is so important and wonderful about this show. That it reminds me that ultimately our civilization is built on the foundation of humanity and compassion for the other individual. The day we really truly lose all of that, we will lose the rule of law. And that is truly when we will no longer be human. We will be the walking dead. Thank you guys so much for watching. I just want to remind you that my Swades video has been taken down by red chilies. I mean, at this point, I don't even know what to do besides laugh at my own fate. But if you do want to watch it, please follow me on Instagram. That's where I post all my blocked videos, because even Facebook takes down a lot of my videos, so I'm not able to post on Facebook. So please do follow me on Instagram. The link is down below. If you want to contribute for the channel, you can go ahead and check out my Patreon, which is also linked down below. Yeah, but like, follow me on Facebook also. I mean, not like you shouldn't be liking my page on Facebook just because there are no videos, right? I do a lot of funny posts now and then, and on Twitter I post a lot of random stuff too. So if you're interested, please do follow me everywhere on all my social media. As usual, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.